Hello everybody, my name is Alexander de Poder. I'm a Porsche certified brand ambassador at Champion Porsche in South Florida, and thank you so much for watching my YouTube videos. In today's walk-around video I have a very special one. This is one of 77 Porsche 911 GT3 R Rennsports. This vehicle just arrived at our dealership a few weeks ago. This is going to be our first walk-around video here in the Champion Porsche studio, and thank you so much for joining me in this YouTube video. We're going to start with the exterior details, talk about all these special features on this full race car. So this is not street legal, pure race car. And because it is based off the GT3 R race car that Porsche campaigns around the world in both IMSA, WEC, but also in the DTM Championship, Porsche now with the customer version had no limitations in terms of regulations. So let's talk about all these special features that Porsche has done on this car. We're going to start with the aerodynamics on the outside. There is only a few body panels that are similar to the standard GT3 R race car. That's going to be the hood design, so the front bonnet. It's going to be the roof design is the same as the GT3 R, and that's also going to be the doors. Now you can imagine a lot of lightweight materials on this vehicle, so the use of carbon fiber all around in the body. You can also see how wide the vehicle is compared to, let's say, a GT3 or GT3 RS. Now looking at the front fascia design, the front bumper is different to the standard GT3 R. Of course, you can imagine that downforce, aerodynamics, but also cooling is very important. It carries the same centrally located radiator, gigantic size radiator. But what Porsche has redesigned for the Rennsport version is mostly this intake system here on the front. Also the flicks, you can see here on the side. Normally they're fully exposed in racing, but as this vehicle of course will likely be tracked in a more customer gentleman driving type of experience, has Porsche now created these extra flaps on the outside to protect the flicks here from potential damage. And of course that will really change the aerodynamic proportions of the vehicle if one of those gets compromised. Now when it comes to the intake, as I mentioned, a lot of air streaming of course to the radiator. It also exits through the front bumper behind the front wheel, which we'll see in a second, but also some air guidance in the intake system to cool the brakes. If you look at the wheel design, that is also different to the GT3 R. So Grant Larson, the designer of Porsche Design, was involved in designing this vehicle all around. And even the wheels, although of course from a mechanical standpoint, still needing to meet the requirements that Porsche Motorsport has. It is a different design wheel. He liked really that multi-spoke design. And of course, this specific vehicle is currently on its transport wheel set. It comes with an extra set of wheels with full slicks and also rain tires. And that's why currently you can see on this transport set there's also the plastic to protect the full racing slicks. The car also comes with a beautiful cage, which we'll take a look on later on here in the back of the room. Let's start of course with the rest of the aerodynamics. Before we do so, by the way, let's take a look at the headlights. So again, the headlights different to the standard GT3 R, and again of course no regulations in terms of limitations. So look at all the LED design on the inside of the housing. Very robotic. Grant Larson also mentions in a very cool interview with Porsche Club of America is the skeleton design that really represents this vehicle in terms of all the shapes and the vents and the angular lines that this vehicle has. Quickly also the fuel intake, of course, like a pure race car as it is. It's going to be here in the front, all covered around that carbon fiber that you can see. Very cool. Also the wiper in the middle as a pure race car, of course, one single wiper in the middle of the vehicle. Okay, so we talked about the front design of the vehicle, we talked about the wheels. Let's take a look here on the sides, where you can see the absence of any rear view mirrors. So Porsche decided very early on in the development that they were going to go for a camera system, which you can see here in the very wide front fender. Also again, from a regulation standpoint, no limitations, where normally on the GT3 R, you can see that a lot of this is more enclosed in terms of rocks or things like that being thrown up by the front wheels. You can see that this is very open to get that air, of course, to exit that front wheel well, to keep that downforce level in the right way, and also to make that air, of course, go into the direction that Porsche Motorsport wants it to go. You can also see all that carbon exposed, right? So part, of course, the design of these vehicles is not just the lightweight effectiveness of carbon fiber, but it's also, of course, that cool design of the weave, in this case in that matte finish. Okay, the doors, as I mentioned earlier, the same as the Rennsport. Just a quick show here. And of course the lightness of these doors, it's really hard of course on video to showcase the lightness, but this basically weighs nothing. It is incredible. Again, carryover from the Rennsport, from the GT3 R. And then also the door handle design, you might notice, is actually a 9-in-1 design door handle, as the race car, of course, in some cases uses some of the previous generation when it comes to those type of things. Then we can also see these intakes here to the side. Again, very different to the standard GT3 R. So of course they were looking for certain aerodynamic proportions, but also cooling, of course, for the flat six. And we'll talk about the flat six because this is not your standard flat six. So the standard GT3 R, 4.2 liter displacement, producing, depending on the mapping, about 580 horsepower. Now the Rennsport, same engine, but now pushing over 610 horsepower. And depending also on the weight, meaning the color of the vehicle, is the Rennsport even lighter than the GT3 R. Again, no limitations in the regulation. The standard vehicle in its full carbon exposed without paint is about 25 kilos lighter than the GT3 R. Okay, let's continue more to the back, where you can see this very iconic shape, of course, typical Porsche 911. The lightweight glass, of course, in the race cars. But look at this whale tail, as it is known in the Porsche world. Kind of reminiscent to the classic 935 from back in the 70s. Of course, the overall proportions aerodynamically very similar to the GT3 R. So from a drag and aerodynamic efficiency, they couldn't play too much with the aero balance on the vehicle versus the standard GT3 R that it's based on. So yes, the design of the wing is very different, but in terms of its aerodynamic proportions, its drag and its downforce is very similar to the standard GT3 R wing. Now they had some aerodynamic challenges with the wing itself, and that's why you can see two additional supports in the middle section of this spoiler or wing. So you can imagine the amount of downforce that this produces in terms of its dimensions. It's of course also very stiff, very strong, of course, the carbon fiber. So aerodynamically they added these two elements. And of course also if you look at the GT3 R, typically these wings have these central support extras in the middle part of the wing. It's a double element wing, so a very large dimension, one on the top, and then a second very lower element, a very large element on the lower section. Now from a design perspective, you can see of course still a lot of 992 Qs, as it is based on the 992 generation GT3 R. You can see this connecting tail light going all the way across. And of course that brings some of the Porsche design into a race car. You can see it's also the font, of course, the same as the standard 911 GT3 RS or the GT3. The exhaust system is similar but different to the GT3 R. So in terms of the exhaust tips, that is an update done specifically for the Rennsport. Of course, very lightweight material. We can also imagine from an acoustic standpoint that the engine sound is just incredible. 9,400 RPM redline, right? So again, over 610 horsepower, 9,400 RPM redline. So you can imagine the amount of heat that gets created, of course. So the diffuser is the same as the GT3 R. But from a design perspective, the exhaust tips are different, with these also very cool lines here you can see. Kind of similar to, for example, a Weissach package GT4 RS. And also from a heat management system, they discovered that these tips are also very well and efficient compared to the standard exhaust system, especially with the amount of heat that gets transitioned towards the diffuser. Now look at the size, of course, of this diffuser. It's just gigantic. You can also really see inside of the engine compartment. Well, we see, of course, the 4.2 liter flat six and also the exhaust system. No catalytic converters, no mufflers. It's just straight out of the engine. There's one thing though that I learned in an instructional video is these actual specific areas here in the exhaust system. They found out in terms of pressures and stuff that benefits the engine and therefore the power output. So it might look like a dampener, but no, it is there purely for extra performance from the engine. Of course, all the safety systems like the rear light. You see, of course, the latches here. Very cool stuff. You can see here also the pressure. On the side also, of course, all pure race car. Also on the roof, you can see that special latch here in terms of safety. Even NECA duct design here on the rear spoiler, as you might notice. The NECA ducts, of course, introduced on the street cars back in 2018 and 19 on the 991.2 GT3 RS and GT2 RS, and of course now a common thing aerodynamically on the Porsche GT street cars. Again, one of 77 units in the world. Each car is specifically numbered. So if we open the door on this fantastic automobile, we're going to see that this is unit number 35 out of 77. Porsche Motorsport did a special application process to be granted the allocation to order one of the 77 units. Again, this vehicle just came in. The car was announced about a year and a half ago and unveiled to the world at the very famous Rennsport reunion race in California, or event I should say. And now the first customer cars in the last few months have started to hit the showrooms and also of course the motorsport fans around the world. Okay, so let's have a look at the case that comes with the vehicle. Currently here on display on the left hand side of the room. You can see in the front of the case we have the plaque, once again indicating the limited edition number 35 out of 77, GT3 R Rennsport. Inside the case we're going to see some different materials that come, of course, very important on the racetrack. We have the actual center lock nuts here. Then we have different shims, so depending on your setup preferences, of course your Porsche Motorsport technicians can assist in terms of setting up your suspension the right way. This all comes coordinated in terms of sizing and preferences, of course. You can see they're different color. Let me just show you some of them so you guys have an idea. For example, you can see here this one is finished in blue. This one is finished in this gold. And again, depending on your setup preferences, this all coordinates with one another in terms of your preferences. Then of course we can also see some other materials right behind it. We'll do this a little bit later on, we'll put it back. So you can see here that comes with a car cover. It also comes with another cover. You can imagine if you're sitting, let's say on the grid or in the pit lane waiting during heavy rain, that would be nice to cover off the vehicle in terms of a thermal management. Of course, in terms of the inside, you don't want to get it wet or you don't want to get it humid inside the cabin. So that's where one of these blankets, thermal blankets, comes into play, which is of course very nice if you're sitting there as a driver to go out in, let's say, heavy rain. So many details on the outside. Let's have also a look on the inside, of course. Very similar again to the GT3 R. You might have also noticed, by the way, that the inside is not white. So the standard car would be a full carbon exposed body. But you can see that the basis of the vehicle is a color called agate gray, which is a color that dates back on the 911 now quite a bit of years. So that's kind of cool to see this somewhat standard production color metallic on the inside of the cabin here, of the door. You can of course see the safety roll cage. From that perspective, it's the same as the GT3 R. What they also did is develop a specific ambient lighting package just for the Rennsport. You can see currently illuminated in cabin in this beautiful red color. And then look, of course, at this center carbon fiber transmission tunnel. Just incredible, running, of course, a fully race transmission. All the data logging you can see on the bottom section. We left the ignition on so you guys can see it. The collaboration between Cosworth and Porsche when it comes to some of the software that you can see. Fire extinguisher, battery. So yes, it is a Porsche 911, but this is a pure race car. Lap times were very impressive. There's no really official lap times. We can imagine with the extra performance, depending how capable the driver is and the lighter weight versus a GT3 R, that this car will set amazing lap times around racetracks around the world. Let's have a quick look again also on the on the driver's side of the cabin, where again we left the ignition on so you guys can see this incredible entry. Look at the steering wheel design, of course. The same as the GT3 R with all the different modes, traction control modes, drinking bottle, all the different settings you can do, of course, on the vehicle as you're racing around the racetrack. And then, of course, you can also see the camera system, right? The door is currently open, so it's blocking the view of the left-hand side camera. We can see on the other side, on the passenger side, the camera peeking back there here in the Champion Porsche studio. Of course, the full harnesses, the cage, as I mentioned earlier. Brand new, again, this vehicle just arrived a few weeks ago. This is the first Porsche Motorsports product I've done on my YouTube channel. I want to thank you for joining today. Again, my name is Alexander, Porsche Certified Brand Ambassador at Champion Porsche. My contact information is in the video description. If you're in the area, feel free to contact me directly and come take a look at this one of 77 Porsche 911 GT3 R Rennsport. See you next time. Bye-bye.